Given that we have a quorum, it's 30, we'll start it. Start with the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Eric, you can hear us?
Is Mike?
Muted modem, it looks like he's.
Yes, I can.
Okay, all right, want to make sure just so we know we've got 4, 5, so that's good. The minutes from May 20th, 25, they were distributed. I think a motion for their approval.
So moved.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Any comments, changes, modifications? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Question for the board, relative to minutes. Jerry and I were communicating on a couple of different things, and question came up as to whether or not we need to have minutes printed for the meeting as we are off killing trees. Everybody gets them in advance. Do you want to have them at your place when you arrive, or is it okay to just do them electronic?
Electronically is fine for me.
Okay, let's put it a different way. Anybody want them at their seat? Jerry?
Well, since I had cataracts
Yeah,
surgery,
why don't you want,
I can read them now on screen.
oh, okay, so you're good with not having a hard copy?
Huh?
You're good with,
No, I don't have a problem.
okay,
Okay,
Good,
Paul?
Well,
All right.
fine.
we're all set. Good enough.
You
We
guys.
thanks.
I'm proud of you.
So, too many days then.
Save a tree or two.
So-
Okay, so we are on public comment, nobody in the room. We do not have any attendees. So we will continue to move forward. Next item is the Ferry Road Soccer Field Steep Grant. Congratulations to you, Carl, and everybody who worked on that, and let's talk about it.
I appreciate that, but as usual, Jennifer wrote the grant, and this is something that's been obviously in the works for a while. In fact, it came to the Board of Finance, how long ago? A year, 2 years, probably 2 years even. And I think the bid was about $330,000
It was
and,
actually an ARPA, it came to ARPA with 300,000.
okay. And I think this board kind of passed on it, at some point, saying it seems like a lot of money and then we heard the steep grants were announced, that the maximum amount could be up to $1 million. And we said, well, geez, let's do this work, let's make it field with a scoreboard, and I mean, I think. I have a memo in here, did you guys get the memo?
Yeah.
Yeah, with all the amenities, right, that it will have. And make it a real, U12 field for lacrosse and soccer. That neighboring towns will definitely want to come to Old Saybrook and enjoy that field. Right now, there's a lot of rescheduling. I think Eric spoke to me about this, knows the issue well. So we did apply for this steep grant. We were successful in getting it. It reduces the town amount down to about 222,000, I think. The Board of Selectmen held a meeting before this meeting, and we did move it forward to your board. So it is before you either at this meeting or the next meeting. We'll put this out to bid again. It's already been out to bid once to do the actual construction. We'll put it out to bid again with the additional amenities that are listed. But it just opens up another playing field for the families in town, which is something we want, and we want to attract them, and we want to have great facilities. And this field, Jeff Jacobson's worked a lot on this, his office. It will be a dry field. It will drain like a professional, and parents will be able to enjoy the atmosphere. So, you have the memo in front of you. The Board of Selectmen fully supports it and has voted on it. And I don't know what else to say. But in terms of Jennifer wrote this grant. I just want to give credit where credit is due. Um, she wrote it, it's funny, I was sitting in a meeting here and she hadn't seen the email yet. I got the email just last week. And I walked in and said, we got the grant, and, she shrieks when, she's so happy to get that money and have been successful for the town. So, Ray, Susan, everybody's very excited about it. So,
Yeah.
Great. Are there questions?
I thought we voted on this before.
you did vote on just the field. Just field. You didn't vote on this larger project, so you voted on redoing this field as a drainage project, basically, and making it a field, no other amenities. So the cost of that was north of $300,000. And then, like I said, when we saw the steep grant, you would go for $1 million. They said, well, let's see if we can get this into a steep grant and reduce that cost, but also add a ton of amenities to the field. And that's what we did. Right. But you did.
Right.
You voted on the core project.
Good memory.
Testing.
Can I just make a quick comment?
Go for it.
From a athletic youth sports perspective, this is a huge win. Our fields in town need a significant upgrade, and this is a great start. When you go to other towns, there's, obviously we have a land problem, but to have a big athletic complex. So anything we can do to any of our fields is helpful right now. My only real comment about this project, Carl, is I hope when they engineer this, they take a hard look at the parking, because the way the parking is at that field right now, it's very dangerous. And cars are parking up and down Ferry Road, and people are getting out of their cars in the road. So I hope they take a good look at the parking side of this.
Yep. I know they're adding spaces. I know it can only accommodate so many. So I don't know that we're gonna be able to alleviate parking on the road if that's where people choose to park. I'm not familiar with the
Just having a better defined parking area will be more than helpful, I think. So,
Okay, yep.
you are very limited.
Okay, other questions or comments? Are people ready to act on?
I make a motion to approve an appropriation in the amount of $890,597 to fund a renovation project at the Ferry Road Soccer Field, with $222,649 coming from the town's capital non-recurring fund, Fund 3350 for the town's matching portion, and $667,948 for a reimbursable steep grant, for which the town will be reimbursed upon project completion. Further, to move this appropriation to town meeting for consideration.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments, discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes. Well done.
Great.
On to the discussion about transfer of funds, Tarpon Mill Dam.
Yeah, and by the way, thank you for adding this to the agenda late, and thank you for taking the action on that line item. And similar with this, Trucker, let's see, what am I doing here? Oh, yes, so I don't know the exact amount that we originally appropriated for Chalker's Mill Pond Dam, but I think it was north of 300,000.
350.
350, just on a broad estimate by the engineers. Well, the bids came in mostly lower. We had about 8 or 9 bids on that. I think I reported on this at the last meeting. 2 of them were within about $10,000 of each other, right around 180,000. And then there were a group of bids, at least 3 more, that were south of 250,000. So the bids were in a range. The low bidder is B&W Landscaping, who we've already given a notice of award to. I believe that amount is $182,000. Obviously, there's additional funds remaining that we're not going to expend from this project. So with regard to the sidewalks, the crosswalks rather, those bids look like they're coming in a little bit higher. We have $600,000 set aside for crosswalk projects. the low bid came in at $520,000, but it certainly appears to our town engineer and to me that the low bidder just can't get this done. They're a smaller New Haven contractor. They have to bond this project at the amount that they bid, which is $520,000. Their limit is south of $500,000. So they couldn't even come up with the bond that we need to be able to go forward with this job. We've required of every contractor. And they don't appear too anxious to get it. So when Jeff Jacobson called him and said, hey, look, we can't award you the job if you don't get this bond, he seemed relieved, according to Jeff. So unfortunately, the next low bid was $714,000. There were 3 bids on this project. The third bid was $750,000. The second bidder, coincidentally, happens to be B&W Landscaping and Paving, which is doing Chalkers Mill Pond Dam. They won that bid. So we have 600 set aside. So the motion here is to recommend 130,000 come over from the Chalkers Mill Pond Dam project. That is not the exact amount of the low bid. It adds a little bit of extra, a little bit of a contingency. Perhaps on the Main Street crosswalk project, I think it's like $16,000 in extra funds. If we don't need them, obviously they will come back to the capital non-recurring fund. But that is a project that the town is not doing with a grant. It's a project that the town is doing with its own funds, essentially. So it's probably good to build in a small contingency. So that is the motion, and that is the sequence of events that have led to this. I have to tell you that I'm a little bit flabbergasted by these numbers. They're big. But it's probably one of the more critical
Yeah.
projects that we're doing in town is to make these crosswalks safer. And, you know, we already planned on 600,000, so this is asking for a little bit more money. This, if this board approves this, items number 6 and 7 will have to go to a town meeting for approval. So that is my elevator pitch.
Got questions for the first? George?
A quick question, so, do they itemize their bid? I mean, is there a particular thing that is just like mind-boggling how much it is?
I'm not the one to answer
I see.
that question.
Okay.
I can get you a follow-up answer on that. Because they do bid unit prices, so we can show you what the contractors looked at and what is costing the most money.
Right.
So I can do that. I can get that for you.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, right, it's a for sidewalk, I mean, we're not even doing anything to the we call that the skirt part, right?
Raising energy.
Yeah, right, the part going into the sidewalk.
Yeah, it's gonna be level. There are gonna be, for instance, in front of Bongo Ron's, there's a parking space that gets lost here. Because the entrance into the crosswalk is bigger. It's like kind of a leaf shape almost, and then it goes into the crosswalk. So I don't know. I have to get you that answer, and I can get
Maybe
it.
it's the lights or something, right? Right, yeah, okay.
There's not that many lights, and they're solar powered. So I'm not sure.
Okay, other questions?
Carl, this is only for the 3 on the northern part of Main Street, correct? This doesn't include Sheffield and something by the Cape, right?
It does not. Those are in design.
How long on the design approval? Do we know for the
Well,
last 2?
Probably the design is not done, and then based on, the good news is, based on the comments that we've had with these, the design review and approval should be quicker. With these designs, I can tell you, we went back and forth 3 times with DOT. It was frustrating. We made some changes. They came back and they made changes to the way it was before. So we actually ended up doing a Teams call with them and us to say, you're confusing us. We've submitted this twice and you've given us contradictory advice. So they actually apologize for that. Normally, we don't do a Teams call like that, but we did it in this case because it was a little confusing. So the good news is we know exactly what they want. And everything should go a lot quicker as we design the next two. And get approvals. What are you looking at? Maybe next summer.
For construction.
Next summer for the other two?
Next summer, at least for. So the issue is, will they allow a crosswalk at the Cape? If they do not, then we will just improve the Sheffield Street one. They may not allow another crosswalk.
I guess my question is, what is the timeline on approval and design? Is it worth trying to get the approvals to package it all as one?
No, I don't want to delay these. Nope.
Okay.
No, it doesn't. Actually, Eric, I don't think there's any advantage to doing that at all.
No economies.
No, no economies of scale, nothing. No.
Okay, George.
I think the one at the Cape is the most important, to be honest with you. I mean,
It
they're all
is.
important, but the one at the Cape is probably the most important of all 5 that we could have.
Kids are quicker than older folks. You're right. Crossing the street.
So you're very good at applying for grants when we have projects, and so I'm sure you looked into grants for the sidewalk. So where there's nothing available, okay, it just feels like it's a safety thing, and the state needs approval, so it feels like there's a lot of things tied into this, right? So
Kind of funny you say that because the state. I got an email about a week ago saying that, are you interested? We've identified certain crosswalks based on traffic patterns and the way people cross. And we've identified the crosswalks on your main street as projects that we want to look at with rapidly repeating flashing beacons, which is exactly what we're doing for 2028.
Oh.
So I said, no. But I'd like you to look at the crosswalk at the Congregational Church over near Pennywise Lane for that project. And they said, okay, we'll take a look at it. I told them we have plans right now to do these this year. And hopefully a couple more in 2026. But if we're talking 2028, I'm happy to go in the hopper on that one. And it would be a state program. I don't know that they'll do everything, but they'll probably offer up the rapidly repeating flashing beacons. And I don't know what they intend to do with the crosswalk, probably not much. We're redesigning the crosswalk. They'll probably just keep the crosswalk the way it is and put in the beacons. So, but 2028, we're not doing that.
right. I just also remember that when you start saying that, I remember a while back you mentioned something about the crosswalks around Monkey Farm as well. That there was some.
Well, that is going to happen. Yeah, those are already on buttons,
Right.
except for a crossing from Starbucks to Saybrook Home, which we plan on putting one in.
Okay.
As part of a separate project.
Right, large problem. Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Are we ready to make a motion and vote? If so, I'll move that we transfer $131,000 from the Chocolate Mill Dam Project Fund 3059 to the Main Street Crosswalk Project Fund 3063. Transfer any remaining funds after both projects are concluded to the Capital Non-Recurring Fund 3350. And move this transfer forward to town meeting for approval. Is there a second? Second by Fred. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Okay. So these next two items are items that came up as a result of our budget discussion. First one is we had looked at both the Board of Ed as well as the Department of Police Services in their expenditure patterns. After they have the budget, there is in both cases significant over expenditure on particular line items. And, but also just to emphasize, in both cases, staying within the overall budget for either the board or for the department. The question is whether or not we would want to create a policy, or if, and we already have one on the books, revise a policy that talks to the Board of Finance being informed when a significant over expenditure happens, either prior to it happening or after it happens. So that was the kind of the mood at the time, and I'm just putting it on our agenda so we have an opportunity to talk about it. Does anybody have any particular comments they want to make on it?
You said either before it happens or after it happens?
Well, I'm just saying, I would say, if we wanted to move forward with this, I believe we're in a situation with the Board of Ed, that once we make the allocation for the Board of Ed, what they do with their funds, they do with their funds. We don't have, we, the Board of Finance, don't have an approval or disapproval process after that allocation is made. So if they want to make an expenditure of a line item, $100,000 over that current line item, they could come to us before, or they could come to us after. We're just asking for knowledge about it. We're not in an approval mode. Department of Police Services, I think, is slightly different. We do have a little bit more control, if you want to use that word, over that. And if, we wanted to put ourselves in that position, but that's effectively second guessing the police commission. So I'm just raising the issue more from the fact that this was brought up, I think, a couple of times while we discussed the budget, and wondering whether we would want to put a policy in place.
So I was under the understanding that the school budget, we could not, we would just give them a number. But we could not tell them in any way how they could spend it.
And I think we're saying the same thing. You may be talking a little more generically than I. They give us a budget.
Right.
The budget has certain line items in that budget. And then at the end of the year, what we find out is some of those line items were overexpended. Sometimes significantly overexpended. I think our question is, what did you spend the money on? And so in that case, we're not telling them what they can or can't spend the money on. We're just asking the question, what did you spend the money
So
on?
it's a reconciliation of their budget for the year.
Not so much a reconciliation, just an explanation of expenditures. So we wouldn't change it. It's their budget.
Right.
They've done what they've done, but what did they do? Did they put a fence around the high school field? What did they do? That's the question that, I think this board would want to have answered. And so and I know that was raised, when, on our first meeting that we had with, the superintendent.
Here's handle.
No, I don't wanna, I just wanna, I actually don't see an issue with, I don't know if it's a policy. Because a policy governs this board. I wonder if it's almost a memo saying that, listen, to the Board of Ed, for instance, hey, we know that there's a state statute and we give, wouldn't say exactly this, we give you a lump sum of money, you spend it. But if there is a line item that you're going to exceed by more than $50,000, would you be kind enough to inform the Board of Finance as to why and the direction you're going and perhaps, because, I don't see an issue with that, to be honest with you. I mean,
Yeah.
getting some prior knowledge actually as to budget trends. On the town side, Chris Costa will come to us and say, I think inland wetlands attorney's fees are gonna go over by $2,000, and she's grateful of that, which is great, right? I mean, we want them to be super responsible with their money. Did we do, I think we did something like this a long time ago.
2007.
And it was a memo.
Policy, and this,
Was it a policy or a?
I don't know, I don't
I
remember,
thought,
I'm good at numbers.
I thought it was maybe a memo to the department head saying, if you're gonna exceed your budget, or maybe the chairman, in this case of the police commission, and you're gonna go over by more than 25,000, not that it needs to go to town meeting, but could you come in for a conversation? And I don't know, I'm,
Yeah, and let me emphasize, not budget, but line item.
line up,
Right.
yeah, I'm sorry,
Okay, just one,
Yeah.
just clarification.
whatever.
George,
So, several thoughts here, and so, I think the school, at least the time I've been there, I think they've been good, whether it was policy or just understanding, right? And so, if there's a large sum of money at the end of the year and they're gonna move a capital maintenance from the next year forward, they'll come to talk to us. And I think the track around the turf field, and an example, right? They should move that forward and spend like almost $1 million, right? Or whatever, something like that. That was just a few months ago. And you know, if unexpectedly one of the boilers goes off at the middle school, needs $50,000, I'm sure they're gonna come to us, right? Because they don't have that kind of money. And so there is kind of stuff like that, but the other stuff, I don't think it's known, right? It just money gets moved around, and so it gets more difficult. But in terms of the other departments, whether it's commission and so on, I believe it's something in line, whether it's a policy or memo, something would be good. I think and I couldn't figure this out, right? The question is gonna be, what is the number that we wanna do, right? Because let's pick the example you have, right? The $2,000. If that legal fee, the line item was 2,000 and it basically doubled, or if it was 1,000, and so it went up 200%, right? But even still, it's a small number, right? But 2,000 on a line item that's 500,000. We don't hear, nobody's gonna think about it, right? And so there's gotta be some $25,000 or 200% or something, right? I mean, I'm not exactly sure how to manage this.
I mean, typically you talk about trends.
Right, so during the finance director's report, that example for the $1,000 in the legal fee is gonna pop right out because it's gonna be a large percentage, even though it's not really a material amount. So I think that we do capture those things, the small amounts. What we don't capture is when we get towards the end of the year. And so, every month I'll say everything looks good and everything does look good. And then in the last couple of months, if the department heads have extra money, they might buy a capital item forward too that they need for the following year. I mean, so that's something that they might do. And so the question, I think, is how much do is it 25,000, 50,000? What amount?
Line item.
On a line item, what amount do you want to know? Because we don't want in my personal opinion, the department heads need to manage their business and they have to have, okay, if I do this, I have to tell the Board of Finance. But if it's like something that goes up 200%, like they might not even know it, if it's a 1,000 versus 1,000 item. So I think I can tell you about the percentage changing for sure, if it does something like that for these de minimis things, but I think what you, from what I've heard everybody talking about, you wanna know about the big things.
right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say if we chose a number like $25,000 over a line item, there have been very few times that a department is in that position. And really, frankly, only the Board of Ed and the police commission have the kind of budget that allows that to happen, right?
So,
And Public Works,
so what would a likely story would be that would occur is if, like, for example, maybe even at town hall, if we're short-staffed. And so, you're gonna have the salary line item be down to 50,000, like and then maybe we might hire somebody to come in and do the floors like we had done in the past. That would be an example of something that was over $25,000 that we did. Obviously, when you walked through the door, you saw many floors. But that's an example of something. So I think it happens more in the instances where people are short-staffed. And in the case of DPW, they're probably hiring some firm to help them out with paving or something like that. So you're gonna see the line item go down and the consulting, the professional services line item go up. So, but then it's self-explanatory. Well, I was understaffed and I hired some folks to help me.
Right, so it's a short memo, but
Yeah.
it's just a notification.
Right,
Okay, how do people feel about this? Comments? Your discussion about memo versus policy. I only went to policy because I figured that was, first level of formality, but if there is a level of formality where the board is making a request for memo, and that's fine with me, and it's always something that, particularly even with a memo, that's the kind of thing that if it's not working for one reason or another, it could be easily changed.
Maybe it comes from the finance director,
yeah,
you know, right? Based on input from the Board of Finance. I don't know. Just-
Oh,
I don't wanna open a can of worms. But if department head informs us of a $25,000 switch in line items. And we get that memo. And we ask the individual to come in and explain it to us more. At that point, do we have any further authority to say, no, don't do that? Or once we've put the budget in place?
unless their entire department
Yeah.
goes over by 25,000, then actions have to be taken. So right now, as it stands, they can manage their department with that money. And a lot of times they'll go over budget because of the unexpected things that happen. And very rarely do they go over 25,000. Like, remember, I came in with the retirement fund when we had extra people retiring that we weren't expecting, and then that month I had to come forward and say, we need an action, then that had to go to the town meeting and all. So that's the formality for the whole budget. But as I said, people are managing their budgets as they go through the year. I don't have people to do things, so I'm gonna hire professionals, somebody to help me.
So really,
Trade
So
off.
is it an advisory position that the Board of Finance gives to the department head?
Advisory,
Yeah, I mean, he asked what authority there was. I didn't really understand a response to that question. So is it advisory or is it a demand or a control?
I don't understand. I'm not sure I
We don't
understand.
have the ability, if a department head came in and said, I'm over expending this line item by $25,000. I'm staying within my budget. That's the extent of that conversation. That's the way I understand it.
Yes, that's what I said. Yes.
so really at this point,
But I
doesn't the finance director? She's aware of it, so maybe she just needs to notify us. Whether it's when it happens,
As part of the
I can do that,
monthly
because-
fund, as
Yeah.
part of the finance director's report.
right, because she's aware of it, so rather than us get involved. Have her tell us.
And then if you want somebody to come in and talk about it more, you can ask.
Yeah.
George, fine.
I'm just trying to think of recent examples that come up, and this one may not be in terms of numbers, may not be, we'll hit the reader, right? But I think it's the example that I'm thinking of, right? So when the voter registrars came in and they said, with the change in the voting, early voting, so on, they basically needed to add more hours and they needed more stipend money and so on. And it was not gonna be a once off. This year they're gonna go over, but it's gonna be that new amount every year going forward. And so if a department came in and said, look, I need $25,000 because something broke and we fixed it and we're done, I'm okay with that. But it's like, I'm gonna do $25,000, and guess what? It's gonna be $25,000 every single year. And on top of that, that's gonna be a 30% increase on top of that 25,000 every year going forward. That's a different story, right? And that's a kind of and I think that's a conversation that conversation would be useful, right? So.
Well, that's a budgeting issue, right?
Sure, but it gives us a heads up. right? Because mid-year,
Yeah,
you're gonna
oh, yeah,
realize,
yeah.
yeah, okay, next year, you
Yeah.
guys are gonna be
Yeah.
up, and it's gonna be a 3% increase.
So do I get a sense from the group that the way to start this would be to ask the finance director as part of her monthly report to throw in, should there be a line item excess? You inform us.
Yep.
And then, should we want more information, we can invite the department head in. Is that,
That's fine.
people comfortable with that?
Easy.
Okay,
She kind of notifies us now.
Well, not specifically like that, that's.
Yeah.
No, not specifically.
Yeah, I'll just add a little more color, that's all.
there you go.
She's doing department totals.
I
Right.
can see
And we're
it, I
talking
can see it,
about-
yeah.
Yeah.
Fine, that.
Is, any other comments on that? Should we move forward? All right, on the, fund balance, that we may have raised more questions than answered in the sense of sending the current policy out. But, Leanne, why don't you give us a little bit about where we are in current policy? Let me just say that the reason why this came up at all was really the last 6 lines of the current policy, which is really talking about what the distribution of surplus funds, and the process for distributing that. But with the current policy in hand, why don't we talk about that right now, and then we'll move into the allocation of surplus.
Okay. So this policy was, we were required to do it back in 2017-18. We had a finding from our auditors that we had to have this policy. And actually, this policy is really about an accounting for our auditors, so I'm not gonna talk about that, but they are the ones that classify these things as, you know, restricted or non-spendable and all of those definitions. They're the ones that do that, but they say that we have to have the policy. So I will try to stay at the level of how it affects the Board of Finance. And when we wrote this policy, we followed GFOA, Government Financial Officers Association, for guidance. And of course, we have to have a policy, and we have to maintain, and so this is about, first of all, it's about the 17% that we have in our rainy day fund. So I want to talk a little bit about why we have 17% there. Actually, if you have 15%, maybe we should change it in our policy to 17%.
You're right.
But they say that we have to maintain adequate levels of fund balance to mitigate current and future risks. And these are some of the things that we sometimes talk about, maybe sometimes don't, but revenue shortfalls, we don't have those. Unanticipated expenditures, sometimes we have that. Natural disasters and cuts in state aid. So all of those things have affected the town of Old Saybrook. They want to make sure that, you know, we have enough money if we need to call upon our fund balance for any reason. So their appropriate level at a minimum is 2 months of operating revenue. That's 16.7%. We are actually at 17%, but in our policy, it says 15%. So that's why I said maybe we want to move that up a little bit since we're already there. And then factors that they want us to consider when we set this rate of 17% or whatever it's going to be are exposures to one-time outlays. And I personally think that we have that covered with all of our reserve programs and things that we have. So we have strategically thought about that. And potential impact on bond rating. And obviously we had positive response to that. We should also seek to replenish our fund balance. So, you know, we haven't used our fund balance, but what we should keep in mind is that every year as our budget goes up, we need to add a little bit to the rainy day fund so that we keep even with our 17%. So we kind of intuitively do that when we go through the end of the year. And it also addresses the question that I think that y'all want to talk about tonight is what happens if you have too much money, too much surplus. So they do discuss that as well. And they state that that we should make sure that we can understand the structural trend that's occurring that's causing the surplus. And, you know, again, we have talked about that. It's the interest income. It is the fact that our taxpayers always pay their taxes. They pay them back if they're overdue. And so that is our structural issue, and we actually have, taken that into consideration. Carefully raising the amount of money that we want to get from interest income, at least having a thoughtful way of thinking about how we're going to budget for that in the future. But in all cases, the use of fund balance should be prohibited as a funding source for ongoing recurring expenditures. So in other words, do not use the fund balance to offset normal operating income. That's very important. I've included a few things here. One is the list, and I just want to quickly answer one question that George sent over to me prior to the meeting. So there's 5 levels of classifications. One is unassigned. The only fund that has an unassigned fund balance is the general fund. That's free money that we can use. That's our rainy days fund. There's only one fund that has a permanent fund balance, and that's a $5,000 cemetery fund, which I actually don't even think is, I'm trying to research that more to see if that's even correct. And then the other 2 classifications, one is restricted. That is like ARPA. That was a federal act that said you can only use this money in very specific ways, as we all know very well. That is restricted. We can only use those funds. So the auditors then place it in that category. Everything else is pretty much committed because it's, program funds, everything that's an off-budget fund, if it doesn't fall into restricted or the other one is committed because we have it for a specified purpose. The other thing is assigned. And again, this is the one that we don't necessarily, in my advice to use, you don't want to use. That's the one if you were to use the fund balance as part of your budget for the next year to offset the mill rate. And there's actually a procedure in this fund balance policy that says in the event that we had to do that, how would we do it? And so it becomes part of the budget process, and then we would have to assign that in the future. So also the policy states how the town will approve, establish, modify, and classify fund balances, which I've gone through that before with this group. We went over all of these funds, how everything got here through a vote of some sort or a procedure that was appropriate. And also the part that you all wanted to talk about was when in the policy, it states that the Board of Selectmen will recommend to the Board of Finance how to use the surplus. And then it says for specified things, mainly reserves, capital, like long-term obligations of the town. So I included this to just so that we have this in front of you. I'm sorry, I forgot to put a title on here. But for each year, fiscal 18 through fiscal 24, the first column is the total amount of the surplus. The second column, BRF, stands for Budget Reserve Fund. That's the technical name. We call it Rainy Day Fund. And as you can see, back in 18, we were still building our rainy day fund. So most of our surplus went to that until we achieved our goal of getting to 17%. Then, you can see that capital non-recurring, after that, we started putting large amounts of money into our capital non-recurring account. Again, that was a strategic focus of the Board of Finance to build our reserve. That was a plan, build our rainy day fund, build our capital non-recurring. And it went, the capital non-recurring, that CNR, went from 397, up to just under $3 million as it stands right now, which I believe is an appropriate number. I think that's, enough to handle a one-time thing. And then the next column over is what part of the surplus was used for project and or other types of reserves, not the capital non-recurring. And then finally, what portion of the surplus did we utilize for Board of Education programs? So kind of breaks out, how we've been building our rainy day fund, how we've been building our capital non-recurring fund, and how we've been dividing our monies between the needs of the Board of Ed, taking care of their important capital needs as well as the important capital needs around the town. And I will stop there. That's just my overview.
Yeah, it's really-
Wow, it's very good.
Right, okay, just so I fully understand the chart, looking at fiscal year 24.
Yes,
Total surplus, 4.6 million. We put 212 into the reserve fund to keep it at 17%. We put 413 into the capital non-recurring, which raised it up to the 2.8 million. And then we had a balance of 2.88 million that we used for specific projects.
and the board, yeah, and the board.
And is the Board of Ed capital separate from that 2.88?
So
Or is that included in that?
No, if you were to add up the 413,000, the 2.884 plus the 1,156,000, it should equal the 4,665,000.
Well,
That's
see
how-
what that's.
I think I checked. And so, so that just shows how we utilized those, put the surplus in those different buckets.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So the question got raised, two things, possibly even a third, that got raised during the budget discussions. One was whether or not, what was the process for, the Board of Selectmen go through in order to make a recommendation above and beyond the 17%. So, we all know that 17% is the first money out of any surplus. Then Board of Selectmen comes to us with a list of other projects and how are the priorities set? That was one set of questions that got raised. Second question that got raised is, are there other things outside of these infrastructure projects that we would want to fund? And for instance, on that was some kind of mill rate mitigation fund, similar to what I put in the memo. And then I guess the third thing, which hadn't occurred to me until tonight's conversation, when we include the Board of Ed, is at one of the budget hearings, we had the whole question being raised by some of the parents about the playground at the Board of Ed, and what was, how could they access surplus funds and, working through the Board of Ed. So I don't know whether tonight's discussion is more a matter of things on the table that we need to find out more information about, or whether we want to say, they've talked about it and we're happy with where we are. But I just thought, let's get the conversation going, see what people feel, and then see where we want to go from there.
Comment, please, thanks. In your memo, it says mill rate stabilization, several years ago. And there still may be a fund existing called Debt Service Stabilization Fund. Is that the title?
Yeah, there's nothing in it, but we have.
Nothing in it. We had something in it and we transferred it to the Pension Board Stabilization Fund. So there's about, I want to say 250,000, 350,000 in case stock markets go down, liabilities go up, and 1 year we want to make our actuarially required contribution, and Milliman says to us, it's another 200,000. We don't want to, and we want to meet our actuarially required. I don't think it's not ARC anymore. I know it's something else. We can use those funds. So we transferred those funds, but the Debt Service Stabilization Fund, and again, mill rate stabilization, I'm not sure, but mill rate stabilization sounds to me like you might want to, not you, but use surplus to say, hey, we want to plug a hole in the budget this year so that the mill rate doesn't go up as much. And that is using one-time revenue to offset operating costs. It's against JFLA policy. Leanne would be against it personally. Towns do it. And I see it and I go, I can't believe they're doing that, because the following year you just start chasing yourself. And, so a debt service stabilization fund could be used as follows. And You know, we have a public works project coming up. I don't know if it's gonna be overly expensive. But there are murmurs of a couple other projects that you may hear about in the not too distant future. So let's say that one year, let's say we went out to bond and we bonded $12 million. And we have some debt service coming off over the next few years. And let's say 300,000 was coming off. And the first year of that debt payment, we can structure it so that the first year we say, give us a high first year, because we have debt coming off. We have this debt service stabilization fund. And we wanted, it's 700,000, 300,000 coming off. We put 400,000 into it. And then our payments immediately reduce to where they were. And then it's a level funding for the next 19 years, or not level, it slowly declining. Something like that is what was put into place 10 years ago. We had some money in it. It didn't look like we were doing any projects because we had just finished a couple projects over at the high school. And as a result, we said, hey, we were getting to the point where we were fully funding the pension. Let's do that instead, because we didn't have any major projects on the horizon. I kind of like that idea because we may be at the point where we're looking at a couple projects. I have nothing to report tonight, but you know, that is, I think, the way that could be used. That's my 2 cents.
Good, good. Comments people have?
Yeah, the only concern I have is, we always have to keep in the back of our mind that, we had a major disaster. We have a lot of low-lying properties. I believe it's 1,900 in town. And we could lose a lot of revenue like that. That if they wash them in the water or whatever, or damaged. So, you know, I think having a good reserve is important because we are susceptible to having that type of a problem. You know, if there was a storm that came along.
Mhm.
And, you know, a lot of these homes of, I mean, you go down Chocolate Beach, every one of those houses now, looks like $1 million to $2 million. And if they all washed in the water, it would be a big loss of revenue like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, my concern was really about the percentage of surplus relative to the budget. 9.3% to me seems high. And I would, looking at it as a taxpayer, that I would rather see a threshold of a percentage set through the budget. And then taking, say it's 9%, and you come up with $5 million is the total, is the threshold number. Anything over that amount should go to a taxpayer mitigation fund. So you can buy down a mill rate when you think it's exceedingly high. And to me, I thought we were on the cusp of being unfairly taxed at 9.3%. And I would like to see something done for the taxpayer in that sense.
So, one could make the argument that we are doing that by front loading projects. Paying for projects that we are not building into a yearly capital budget. And we're doing that by allocating surplus funds towards those items. So you can make the argument.
Yeah.
But my concern, which I think I'm hearing from you, John, is then what do you do the next year? Then you have a hole in your budget because you're offsetting maybe I'm misunderstanding.
No,
Okay,
you're
all
not
right, all right,
putting any hole in the budget.
okay.
You're setting a percentage, a threshold percentage to your budget. That if the surplus exceeds that percentage, say it's 9.3, you'd have to go to 9.4%. The difference between 9.3 and 9.4 would go into the mitigation fund.
Okay.
And you're not affecting anything going forward.
What does that mitigation fund do?
You accumulate funds until such a time that you reach a point where you think you're gonna have a large mill rate increase, you can buy it down. What is it, 300,000 for a tenth?
Or something?
Yeah, I mean,
But when you're
It's-
buying the mill rate down, you're offsetting operational costs. That's what you're doing.
Exactly,
Okay.
that's exactly.
But that's a
the point.
one-time
But
infusion
it
into the budget.
continues on, you do it every year. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, to me,
So that's
I
hard
think
to
we're being over,
implement.
I
yeah.
think the consumer, that's my business. The taxpayer is being overtaxed. And if I see a 9.3% again, I'm gonna be down, well, I'm not gonna be on the board of finance. You'll be down there complaining.
All right,
I mean, that's just my
Yeah.
approach.
yeah.
Aren't these all good problems?
Excuse me?
Aren't these all good problems?
The revenue, the surpluses have been high.
Well,
And
last year was extremely.
And I think what the two things, increasing the revenue income, increasing some of the other income like we did this year to perhaps, account for more revenues that would reduce the mill rate. In addition to that, I think, what Leanne wants to demonstrate in this chart also is that we are gonna have a third year, of high revenue, okay? So this 3.6, 4.6 is going to continue this year. Leanne and I were talking about this. Leanne believes that we are going to soon return to more total, if we have a surplus, lower surpluses in the range of fiscal year 18 to fiscal year 22. There's some of it that is structurally built in. I mean, we use the word structural. We budget 99%, we collect 99.4%. You know, that's gonna result in a surplus, automatically, if we collect that. And God, you know, that we do collect at least 99%. So I hear what you're saying.
There was a town not far from here that a couple of years ago used ARPA
Well,
funds
a lot of boards of ed are talking about that.
to balance their budget, but then the following year, they had a big increase because they didn't have any more ARPA funds coming in. So that's the only thing that he's doing something.
A lot of towns did that. A lot of boards of ed did that in the larger cities. And now they're facing, yeah, I mean, people.
So, where I guess I'm here is, we, as a group right now, John feels strongly relative to, we should have a threshold, and over that threshold, we should have some ability to assist the taxpayers. I don't think you necessarily are married to the idea of mill rate mitigation, if there's some other way that the taxpayers can be assisted.
No. I'm kind of married to that.
Okay, married to mill rate mitigation.
I mean, you have to be consistent. If you're doing it for the taxpayer, you have to show them that what you're doing is for the taxpayer.
Okay, okay,
In my opinion, I'm only one person here.
right. I would say though, following up on what Carl was saying, if that was, one would need to have either a sense that the mitigation fund was going to continue to have money being put into it. If not, then there's a point where that mitigation fund runs dry, at which point now you're behind the eight ball and are gonna have to raise the mill rate in order to catch up. And so that's how one can figure that mathematically. I don't know, but that would be my concern. You know, let's say we wanted to cap the surplus for the purposes of this conversation at $3 million. And come in this year at 3.4, 3.5, something along those. So now we have 500,000 in mitigation. And what are the criteria for use of that mitigation fund? All of those, I think, need to be discussed and worked out. And, you know, if that's something that we want to do.
So the other thing is, if it's $500,000, I believe that's about 13 cents.
Something, maybe.
Yeah.
So 500,000
You
is
can waste that in
13
the restaurant in half an hour.
Inflation is
Wow.
tough, huh?
I said, you can waste that in half an hour in the restaurant.
So, again. Let's not assume that the town's never gonna borrow again. Okay, so that's why, from a mill rate mitigation point of view. Keeping your debt service relatively steady. And using, I think that is a strong possibility, and you could build that fund. And you will service the taxpayers at a later date.
I think we're all missing the point.
Okay.
The point is that you have to respond to an excess surplus, in my mind, to the taxpayer. You may never have to use the threshold percentage and fund the balance until you reach that threshold. And it's an ongoing process. It doesn't affect anything that you're doing operationally.
Okay.
But it's a sign to the taxpayer that we're aware that sometimes we have a major surplus. And this is what we're doing about it.
Okay.
I mean, 4.6 on a $50 million budget, it's a lot of money. It's
It
almost
is.
10%.
It is.
If I ran my business with that kind of a surplus every year, I would
You'd be a
own a
wealthy
company.
Yeah, adios.
That's just how I feel.
All right,
Yes.
thank you.
Let's switch over to the other part of the conversation, which was around the issue of when the Board of Selectmen comes forward with a set of projects. How those priorities get set and whether they're, we can roll it into that, the whole question about school projects as well as other town infrastructure projects. So you do it every year. What is the process?
Process is at meetings, Matt or Scott might recommend something during the year. Also, as the year goes on, I'll send an email to Leanne saying, if we have a surplus, I think this would be a good use of it. So we collect a list during the year, so I don't try to think of stuff at the end of the year and forget half of it. So. And, talking with the department heads and, just every day being in the office every day and talking to people and walking around town and seeing what the needs are. And, we started an invasives fund several years ago because I learned a lot from Kathy Connolly and that whole group. And in fact, I just signed some contracts today to do some additional work at Coulter Street from that fund, to do some more invasives work. So it's just the day-to-day operations and Board of Selectmen meetings where ideas are coming forward. And we keep a list and then we recommend at the end of the year. We've heard a lot about a playground this year. I have no issues allocating funding towards a playground, and we can significantly help them. But I think we need to coordinate that with the superintendent and the Board of Education, because it's not as simple. It's in a
Wetlands.
what?
Wetlands.
It is, it's in a wetland, so it's a question, are you building a new one or are you renovating the old one? And it's not as simple as just saying, hey, we need 250,000 for a playground. Happy to move that discussion forward, happy to make a significant contribution to that if this board is on board with that. So, you hear projects too, and we work collaboratively all year. And, we listen, the Board of Selectmen listens, we're happy to come forward with ideas that have public support, have board support. Obviously, we can recommend something, this board can vote 7-0 not to fund it. So, it's just more organically working every day, listening to people, seeing what our department heads need, and then discussing items at the Board of Selectmen.
George?
Simple as that.
So again, sorry, multiple points here. So again, if I can use some examples. So, I need to talk to John at some point to understand his process. I understand his philosophy. I understand that. I think right now our surplus is very high. I think Leanne said the interest rates are right now are very high. but it may not last. And so it's, it's not I don't believe we're gonna go $4 or $5 million going forward for the next 20 years, right? And so, and then you think a little bit about, in terms of what you said, how that happens, right? But in terms of then how we spend the fund, and I think this is what Bruce was talking about. So if I can just use some examples, right? So the playground, yes, we could, but for $250,000, the school has that money. Pam already said they are choosing not to do that right now. If they wanted to, they could pay for this tomorrow if they wanted to, more than easily. So there's gotta be some reason, there's gotta be something going on there. So whatever it is, so, right, we're not gonna use up permission, say, here, we're gonna fund that, right? So, the evasive plan, for example, I consider the playground for that one deal. The evasive plan is, it's a continual problem, at least from my understanding, right? And so in which case, that really should be a surplus fund type issue. You can jumpstart it, but after that it becomes a budget item, it can't be. And so these one-off then, I mean, I think Leanne's created this very nice 5-year plan. Most of those are presumably one-off type things. Or I guess my only comment is, and I think in some ways your debt reduction plan, where you have a $12 million plan coming up or something, it's in the same sort of bucket of thinking that's a one-off type thing. My only comment to here is that once we identify the lift, I'm not sure how we're gonna do that, is let's not pick number 4, 5, and 6, or number 9, because it's a smaller amount, and pay that off, because the number 1 would never get done, right? Number 1 is a $5 million plan, but you got a $2 million exit this year. Number 9 gets checked off the list, and number 1 would never get done, right? We're gonna specify number 1, save the $2 million for that $5 million, whatever it is, right? So, whether you pay off, but a debt reduction or pay off something off the list, I think my mind is the same, because that debt reduction has some project that has some sort of priority. So I think the same one. My only comment is just don't go for the easy wins and pick off number 9 or something and have to go for number 10.
Couple theories on that. And we do it with fire trucks, DPW trucks, we pay for them. A lot of towns bond for them because they're generational items, they're 20-year items, and a diesel truck will go for 20 years. We have chosen to not go to market as much. So those are decisions that need to be made too, as to Public Works garage. If it's $1.5 million project, I don't know, do we want to just pay for it? It's not worth going to market for $1.5 million. It's either gets packaged with something else, or you do pay cash for it, probably. I don't think you'd go to market for $1.5 million. Wouldn't be worth it. So, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and the only, you either try to go at the bigger projects, like I keep coming back to the school. They need they need the air system in the middle school, but and they're trying to get there without bonding. Anyway.
But according to, so this, I mean, so they already have $1.4 million in there, right? If I read this correctly.
The schools?
Yeah, this is the first line item of the non-budget fund.
You're right. Yep, that's it. They have 1.46 million.
Right.
And then the other were the funds on the last page.
One other just very quick comment, and in the capital non-recurrent, we have 70% in our reserves. And we have this year about 2.8 right now in our capital non-recurrent fund. So we have $2.8 million for this town. That's, however you want to look at it, it may not be a huge sum of money for capital projects. 2.8 million.
The sidewalk is 150,000. No, it's not.
And we built it to that point. So that's just a 30,000 foot view, if you were to look at that. It's almost like we've gotten our finances in order to where I can go to the state and say, we're willing to put in a 25% match. You know what that does? Gives us an advantage in getting a steep grant.
Big time.
So I'll shut up.
Okay, well, let me suggest we're not at a point where this board is ready to make a decision. I think we've put some good ideas on the table. We will not know about a surplus until sometime in July. So perhaps we pick this up at our meetings in July to be able to see what we want to do with it. Is that okay? Anybody object? Hearing no objection, we'll move on. I believe we are at the selectmen's report.
Very quickly, we've begun dispatcher negotiations. We've had our first exchange of proposals yesterday. We'll meet again in 2 weeks. Tomorrow night is the listening session at the middle school. Not sure how many folks will be there, but I think it is piqued a few people's interest, so we will have our consultant there. We have about several questions that we will ask the audience to gain input. The survey results may be available in presentation form tomorrow, so I may have those also. I think we had over 300 responses to the online survey, so the public outreach, 300 is not a lot, but sometimes it's hard to get that public outreach. So I feel like it's been very positive with regard to public outreach in this process. So that makes me real happy. The application period has ended. I'll give you a number. We've ended up with about 35 applications. Okay, so high or low? Would you say
Unbelievable.
high or low?
High.
Yeah, so it's funny, people have different reactions to that. Some will say, geez, only 35. But here's I said that. I thought when they told us in the beginning that we would only have 25 to 35, I'm like, this is old Saybrook. Who would want to be chief here, And I was like, I can't believe we're not gonna get 75. And he said, here's why. Your average sergeant can make $100,000 in salary and another 100,000 on road jobs and overtime. Why do they want the responsibility of a chief? So you've got to want to be chief if you want to be chief. And he said, that's why you're only going to get about 25 or so. And we ended up with 35. A week ago, we had 17. So they all came in at the end.
So the question I have is,
Yeah.
we seem to, do more road duty than other towns. And, that's why the overtime is so high, or that second road work is there. I don't know who looks at that, but I would believe that, when I go to Madison and I see regular people with signs for construction, and yet we've got, 2 cruisers, 2 cops all over. I wonder if, I don't know who the police commissioner or somebody should look at this and say, why, to me, it's excessive compared to other towns.
Well, I'll add to that, Brad, in that the PERF report, one of the issues that the PERF report raised was that the officers didn't like doing it. And so that was one of the reasons why morale was poor, was the fact that we had that. So that it all gets combined, into the soup. So, but I think that's up to the police commission and the new chief, right?
It would be, and see if you want to enter into a interlocal agreement, maybe with Clinton and Madison, or to see, if your cops don't want the job, maybe you go to the next town, see if anybody wants it, and so
So
there's
the point is that I believe our town is doing it a lot more than other towns.
Yeah, there are definitely roads, not every road, but there's certain roads that have been designated busy enough to require that. So
Or
anyway,
whose guidelines?
who what?
Who sets that guideline that says?
Yeah, and that maybe can be looked at.
That's what I'm after.
So, so that process after tomorrow is probably gonna go a little radio silent as we narrow that list down to whatever the list will be, whatever top 5, top 10, I'm not sure, and then go from there. So just to give it, yes.
Limits the list.
So there are, in the job application, there are certain requirements that the applicant has to hit. So the consultant with his team will look at the applicants and determine which ones can be immediately discarded because they don't meet the minimum qualifications. And then even when you do meet the minimum qualifications, maybe you don't have the experience or anything like that. So the police commission will get an explanation as to why candidates have made, whether it's a top tier, 2 tiers, whatever, and why others didn't. So they will see every application.
Thank you.
What's the format tomorrow? Like,
The format is a couple questions, maybe 2 or 3 questions to the audience. I'm gonna have the police chairman, I'm gonna do an introduction, turn it over to the police commission chairman to ask the questions, and the consultant will be there taking notes and listening. That's the format, very informal. It's a listening
there's
session.
kind of listening.
Yeah.
You can almost hear like what the public is thinking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
This morning we did EDC awards. Again, I want to thank Jennifer Donahue. She did a great job. We identified, there were 6 businesses that we gave, awards to. Pizza Palace, Tamar and Casey Clothing, same owner. Fromage, I'm gonna forget a few, anyway.
And the rest.
What?
And the rest of them.
And the rest, there are 3 others, they're all great, Monkey Farm, that's right. So it was really well done. Down at the Duffy Pavilion, really nicely done. Jennifer gave me a script, and Dave Prendergrass was there with me handing out the awards. At the end of it, we recognized Judy Sullivan, who will be retiring at the end of this month. And we gave her the John Baldoni Spirit of Old Saybrook Award. There's been 8 honorees since 2008, and Judy is now one of them. So well deserved on Judy's part. And then at the end of that, there were 2 excellent design excellence awards that were given to Mike Picard for the redesign of 745 Osteria building, which will soon be a different organization, and also the apartments on Lynn Street that he's created. And lastly, June 22nd, we're in final mode for our Sunday party on June 22nd. I hope you're all there. Just cross your fingers for some good weather, and we are jam-packed. We moved additional vendors into Porter Plaza this year, just because we had so many. We still have a wait list in addition to that. So we're trying something new to see if people want to go into Porter Plaza more to enjoy themselves. We're gonna have the band this year is gonna be a little bit bigger and better. We have a band called Sugar. I think most of you have probably heard me say that. Should be great. Should be a great party. Yeah.
Good. Okay, any questions for the first speaker?
I don't know what Porter Plaza is.
It's where the pizza place and the gym is right here. What's the pizza place?
Fornos.
No.
Fiore.
Fiore's. That plaza
Oh, I see.
and that big gym and the estuary, where the estuary council teams is.
Okay.
Yeah, there.
Will it have kids stuff?
Yeah, in Porter Plaza is where we're gonna set up a lot of the kids' stuff.
Be a lot of kids stuff?
Yes,
think-
not only in there, but elsewhere.
Okay, thank you very much. Comments from board members? Any board members come? Very done. Move on, public comment. We are again without attendees, either virtually or in the room. So we move to comments from the chair. 2 quick comments from me. One is I will be out of town on June 17th, which is our next meeting, so the vice chair gets to meet. It's in your hands, George, sure the capable hands.
You're capable of canceling, right?
Well, and then that brings up the meeting following that is July 1st, which is the July 4th meeting. It is also probably too early for any other reports. I wouldn't suggest that we cancel tonight, because you never know what's gonna come up between now and then.
Yeah, you can.
But I would suggest that maybe at the meeting on the 17th, check in, see whether or not we do have any business on the 1st, and if not, I'll plan to cancel it.
We could think about canceling.
Pardon?
We can think about
Oh, we can think.
Not that I have anything to do.
We'll pencil a cancel and we'll make it fun.
You will have the awesome responsibility.
Sounds like-
About keeping us in town for July first. Yes.
Saturday is 4th of July.
Friday.
Friday, 4th of July.
Yeah.
Is our next meeting on high school graduation? Is that the 17th or is it the 16th?
No, the graduation is
16th, I
on the
think.
16th.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions of that? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second, all in favor, please say aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.